All right, man, peace. So the NFL has released its 2018 nominees for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Of course, the story that is on everyone's lips is whether or not Terrell Owens will be inducted into the NFL Hall of Fame. Also in juxtaposition to Randy Moss. As we all know, the rationale for not allowing Terrell Owens into the NFL Hall of Fame is his conduct. But weight in the balance, Randy Moss's conduct has been just as bad, if not worse. So basically, the Hall of Fame voters are in a pickle. Of course, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
Thank you, Molly. The Pro Football Hall of Fame announced its modern era finalists for the 2018 class, which include 4 former players who are in their first year of eligibility. All 4 were on the NFL's All-Decade team of the 2000s, and each was All-Pro at least 4 times. Ray Lewis and Brian Urlacher have both won the Defensive Player of the Year, and Randy Moss ranks in the top 4 in receiving yards and touchdowns.
Well, the other 3 guys on this list are definitely going to get in. I don't know if Randy Moss is going to get in, but Ray Lewis is the first ballot Hall of Famer. Urlacher will get in on the first ballot, I believe, and Hutchinson will most likely get in as well.
For more on this, let's get back to First Take.
Thank you kindly. So the Hall of Fame finalists for 2018 have been announced. Our Randy Moss, congratulations, along with Terrell Owens, are both finalists. Max, if Moss gets in this year, should T.O. also get in this year?
T.O. should have been in. T.O.'s a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's one of the greatest receivers ever.
Right, but that's not the question. The question is not whether or not T.O. should have been in. What's past is prologue. The question is, should T.O. get in this year, especially in light of Randy Moss now being on the ballot?
However, I don't think that, I think that's independent of Randy Moss. Hear what happens with Randy. Of course, Randy Moss should also get in. But one thing to me is not related to the other.
Well, that's the problem. That's the problem, sir. Due to the fact that the NFL Hall of Fame voting committee has decided to change the criteria in regards to what would validate someone as an NFL Hall of Famer, that is supposed to now have a trickle-down effect on every nominee that comes thereafter. So, of course, if one is thinking rationally and logically, there should be a relation to whether or not Randy Moss gets in. The NFL Hall of Fame voters cannot just come out and say, well, we don't believe that T.O. should be in the Hall of Fame because of his conduct that was detrimental on the field, and then totally expunge that criteria for Randy Moss. Can't do that.
Because I'm already at the position, Stephen A., where T.O. the Hall of Fame is making a mockery of itself.
I'm not sure if it's making a mockery of itself. I think that that's debatable. I think that whoever is allowing the Hall of Fame voters to create their own criteria, I believe that they're the ones that are making a mockery of themselves. Whoever that authority figure may be. I believe that whoever the voters are should be given a certain string of parameters that they have to adhere to in order for them to determine who deserves to be voted into the Hall of Fame. They should not be able to come up with their own criteria. And if they're found to be in dereliction of that duty, they should be stripped of their ability to be a deciding factor in who gets into the NFL Hall of Fame. At the end of the day, you're playing with people's lives. You're also playing with their ability to make money. I mentioned this on a previous video. That's the real reason why Terrell Owens is so upset, is because if he gets into the Hall of Fame, that multiplies his net worth in regards to his ability to make money, signing autographs, making appearances, etc. It's very important. And please remember, T.O. has paternity issues.
By not having T.O. already inducted, already enshrined. And so that is independent of Randy Moss. Now, Randy Moss should also clearly be in. But it's not that, well, if T.O.'s not in, then I don't want Randy Moss in. No, I don't care about that. They should both be in. And if Randy Moss gets in and T.O. doesn't, I'm not going to say keep Randy Moss out because T.O.'s not in. Matter of fact, we were discussing white privilege before, Stephen A., and my point of view there, to me, it's not about, hey, white people, don't insist on proper treatment. It's, hey, white people, why don't you make sure everyone gets proper treatment, right?
Well, I think that the real conversation in regards to quote-unquote white privilege is that there should not be any. The crux of the conversation in regards to quote-unquote white privilege should not be white people, let's make sure everybody gets a fair shake. But his thought process once again alludes to a sentiment that I stated in regards to Max Kellerman, which is that the modern-day Caucasian liberal really just manifests the white man's burden mindset. And I don't even think that he understands that he does that, because so much of how people think is subconscious. That's the real impetus behind many of his rants in regards to quote unquote racial equality, is the belief that he as a Caucasian man should rule justly as long as he's allowed to still rule. See, Max Kellerman and many other Caucasian liberals understand that when Barack Obama was in the quote unquote White House, he really wasn't a black man in the White House. He was just another person representing the ideals that have been set up by Caucasian hegemony. But anyway, back to Randy Moss and Terrell Owens. This is truly going to be a referendum on whether or not the NFL Hall of Fame voters have a personal issue with T.O., or whether or not they're going to be consistent in this new criteria that they have created. So yes, this is very important. And no, Randy Moss and Terrell Owens are not independent of each other, not at all. I don't think that Mr. Kellerman understands that.
It's the same sort of thing. Yes, T.O. should be in, but to me that's independent of Randy Moss.
It's not independent of Randy Moss.
Thank you, sir.
We respectfully disagree there. I want to say this. Randy Moss and Terrell Owens should both be first ballot Hall of Famers. Max and I do not disagree there. But I do believe that if T.O. suffered, then Randy Moss should suffer. It's wrong.
I agree. If you're going to create a new standard, then it has to trickle down to everyone else.
Wrong. I understand it's not fair. I get all of that. But here's where the fairness comes into the equation. T.O. statistically, more receptions, okay? More yardage, 3 less touchdowns, top 3 all-time in most receiver categories. Randy Moss is top 2 all-time. Obviously, both are looking up at the great Jerry Rice. Randy Moss changed the game in ways that other people can't. I thought he was a little better than T.O. It has nothing.
Well, I thought that Randy was a little bit more explosive than T.O. I thought that Randy Moss made more wild plays than not just than T.O., but than any other receiver in NFL history. You know, Randy Moss to me is like the Vince Carter of the NFL. Vince Carter was not the player of a Kobe Bryant, but Vince Carter made more wild plays while he was healthy than even Kobe Bryant did. You know, from about 1999 to about 2002, 2003, Vince Carter had more wild plays than anybody else in the NBA, even more than Kobe, even though Kobe is the discernibly better player. You know, physically, as far as physical gifts, I will give Vince a slight advantage over Kobe, but mentally it's not even close. They're not even in the same stratosphere. And of course, Kobe was much better with injuries than Vince was. I think that is very, very similar to the comparison between a Randy Moss and a T.O. I think that you could count on T.O. much more than you could count on Randy in regards to in-game. But, you know, T.O. also had issues mentally, but that goes back to his father issues. You know, and Randy Moss had some upbringing issues as well, as was, you know, very, very well detailed in the ESPN 30 for 30 that they did on Randy Moss and his upbringing.
Nothing to do, my opinion has nothing to do with that. Clearly, T.O. is being left out because of behavioral issues and with his effect on a locker room. Some would argue the same about Randy Moss. In Oakland, to a lesser degree, in New England and Minnesota. Do I think that's fair to Randy Moss? Absolutely not. But if you're going to go by that as an excuse to leave T.O. out of it, then how do you justify letting Randy Moss in? The fact of the matter is that what really rakes my nerves, and I don't know if enough people have said this, so I will say this. It's professional sports for a reason. There are grown men playing this game. You don't have to like everybody you work with. You don't necessarily have to get along with everybody that you work with. But it's incumbent upon the organization to bring everybody and galvanize the troops, to bring them together for the purposes of one goal. I know the great Bill Polian, Hall of Fame executive, who I love dearly.
And, you know, Stephen A. is going on one of his long-winded rants. Randy Moss also has a lot of, in my view, he has a lot of Dennis Rodman in him also. When Dennis Rodman was within a framework of strong leadership, you could kind of rein him in. But if you took that leadership away, he was going to go haywire. When Dennis was in Detroit, he was a little bit more confined. There was a very strong brain trust with Chuck Daly and Isaiah Thomas there. Joe Dumars, Lambeer, etc. Then Dennis goes to San Antonio. He doesn't really respect David Robinson. He doesn't respect the coaches there, whoever they were. I believe it was John Lucas and Bob Hill, but one of you brothers can correct me on that. Doesn't respect David Robinson. They had to, he had to move on. Of course, he ends up moving on to Chicago, where of course he respects Michael Jordan, and Phil Jackson is a great mind control handler who utilized Zen Buddhism to kind of rein Dennis in a little bit. Randy Moss is very reminiscent of that. And even Randy rebelled eventually against Bill Belichick. So Randy Moss is, he's certainly a character in sports history, very, very much similar to an Allen Iverson as well. That type of a character who became, kind of synonymous with an era. When you think about that late 90s, 2000s era, you think about Allen Iverson, you think about Randy Moss, Michael Vick, all the guys who came in with the cornrows and the rebellious attitude, and they kind of defined that era.
Disagrees and believes that Terrell Owens was justified for being out of the Hall of Fame. I emphatically yet respectfully disagree with him. And the reason why I say that is this. If Terrell Owens and everybody else have to be perfect in terms of their behavior, not just their play, why do I need a coach? Why do I need an executive? Pro personnel scouts, GMs, etc. What purpose do you serve? You ain't playing. So at the point that I'm trying to make, if you ain't playing, it's your job to make sure that you bring components together on a field.
Particularly when their argument seems to be that interpersonal dynamics are poisoning the locker room, then you're taking the responsibility off the players, the other players that he's supposedly poisoning, while advocating your own in terms of making the situation better.
Well, once again, that's a reflection of the coach, as Stephen A. pointed out. But I think that the little component that Stephen A. is missing is that, as I've noted to you brothers already, most of the top level coaches in professional sports are MK handlers. And people like Terrell Owens, Randy Moss, they would have needed a coach with MK handler level manipulation abilities in order to rein them in and maximize them. Even Bill Belichick was unable to rein in Randy Moss for very long. Terrell Owens is really someone who is in need of counsel, mental counsel and spiritual counsel, because of the void that he has in his life, not having a dad. For those of you who don't know, if I remember correctly, one of you brothers can correct me, he was raised by his grandmom and his mom, and his birth dad was living right across the street his whole life, and he did not even know it. I mean, can you imagine that? To have your birth dad living, if not right across the street, right in near proximity. He knew the person, but he did not know that that was his father. And you see that so many times in the so-called black community with people that are raised by people who they think are their older sister, is really their mother. The father's living right across the street and they never know about it. That was also the issue with Jesse Jackson, by the way. I believe I brought that out in the video that I did on him. But these are issues that resonate all the way into someone's adulthood. A lot of unresolved narratives in someone's life that stop them from really ascending to the level that they should ascend to. There's a reason why Jerry Rice and Michael Jordan were able to get to where they are. They both had strong fathers, man.
The issue is this. Personalities are very, very subjective in terms of judgment. What one person may not like and be turned off by, another person has no problem with. I covered Terrell Owens and Donovan McNabb in Philadelphia. I am telling you, you walk inside the Eagles locker room, just as many dudes that were against Terrell Owens was as many dudes that were in support of him. Some of them actually turned against Donovan McNabb because they sided with Terrell Owens. And I'm not saying they were right or wrong or whatever. I'm saying that it's proof to the point that there are people who have no problem with that very personality that somebody else might have a problem with.
Let me say this. T.O., that 1 year in Philadelphia, was as dominant, in my view. As dominant, meaning as effective, as impactful for the Philadelphia Eagles as Randy Moss was in his first year with the New England Patriots. Even though Randy Moss had 23 touchdowns, Randy Moss also played with a far better quarterback. And of course, I'm not trying to diminish Randy's impact that year. He was incredible. But to me, T.O. may have been the most important player on that whole team. I don't think that Randy was the most important player for the New England Patriots. T.O. was a dominant player in his career, especially that year. And Randy was as well, but Randy was just more likely to tap out on his team. T.O. was more likely to tap out on his quarterback.
What you're identifying is correctly, I believe, is the central issue here. And Bill Polian, who I also obviously everyone has a lot of respect for Bill Polian, but I also very strongly disagree. I think a lot of the T.O. stuff is people insisting that your behavior conform to what they conceive as proper behavior. And if it deviates, even if it doesn't cause a disruption, even if many people, as you would say, gravitate toward it, they still say, no good. Here's the bottom line about T.O.
I also think that many of these media guys are just trying to get their pound of flesh from T.O. For whatever reason, Terrell Owens rubbed many members of the media the wrong way. And they're trying to show him that, look, no matter how hard you worked, no matter how long you trained, no matter the impact that you had on the field, we still count. And many of these media guys are made to feel like they don't count by the players. They're marginalized. And we're also living in an age today where anyone can be a media member. All you need is a camera phone. You don't have to go to journalism school anymore. So I believe that has led to a heightened level of bitterness amongst trained journalists. And it comes out in situations like this.
How many Super Bowls did he play in?
One.
He played on one leg.
That was the best play.
Heading into the game, I heard constant chatter in the press, in the print media, online, on TV, on radio, constant chatter of how selfish he was being. Selfish, imagine this. Oh, he wants to play. I've never heard that before.
Because everything in life is about perspective, and I agree with Kellerman there. If there was another player, that they would have said, look at how he's sacrificing. If that was Peyton Manning or Tom Brady, they would have lionized them. They would have said, wow, look at the effort. Look at what he's bringing to his team. But when it's someone that you don't like, that's how easily you can flip the script. Everything in life is about perspective and narrative. That's why the study of history is so very important, so integral to truly understanding your place in the world contextually. Because people will flip the script if you allow them to.
For an injured player is insisting on playing. Selfish, no, that's selfless. He's giving his body up for in the cause of trying to help the team win. And then how did he play once he was on the field? He was the best player on the field, certainly for the Eagles. So all the nonsense about his personality is people mapping onto T.O., calling him a cancer, saying if you don't do it our way, then then there's something wrong with the way you've done it. Steve and I also dealt with T.O. throughout a lot of his career, here and there. I didn't cover him in Philly. He was never late to a TV interview. I never had any issue. I never found him to be a problem to deal with.
But you know what, though? That's because, Max Kellerman, you're kind of the younger generation. You kind of grew up in the hip-hop era. So you were able to vibe with him on a different level than, say, someone who was 45 years old or 50 years old during the time that T.O. was playing. You and T.O. are in similar age groups. I believe T.O.'s like 42, probably right now. Kellerman's like, what, maybe 45, 46? And, as many of you brothers out there know, Max Kellerman used to be a rapper or tried to be a rapper in the early 90s. So I think that's probably why he's a little bit incredulous as to why he was able to communicate with T.O. and other reporters were not. Remember, communication is a two-way street. You have to both want to emit your message and receive the other person's message to have proper communication. Many of these reporters, once they felt like they had T.O. pigeonholed. They no longer were concerned with hearing what he had to say. They were more concerned with twisting his words and using them against him.
It goes far deeper than that. We've seen guys, and we've heard about what teams have tolerated with guys with alcohol, drug use, behavioral issues, etc., etc. We learned more about T.O. near the tail end of his career. Fathers right across the street never acknowledged him. We've seen this man break down in tears and recognized how emotionally trying life was for him. It didn't
And I can imagine that, man. I can imagine. Like, that's why I make videos about issues like like what a lot of these little black boys are going through in their households, particularly if they're being raised by all women. Because I thank the Most High every day that I had a strong father, strong mother, a balanced family. Because I mean, and look, that female energy is something crazy, and you have to have that balance, and you also have to be gifted from the Most High to be able to deal with, you know, certain hurdles and stumbling blocks growing up. Being able to deflect negative energy, you're going to deal with that in school and life, in your neighborhood, from certain family members, from so-called friends. But I can imagine what Terrell had to go through with all that feminine energy, which is just chaotic energy when it's left uncontrolled. But, you know, God bless him, because he made it to where he made it to. So hopefully he can find closure one day to those issues that he's dealing with. Of course, Randy Moss had to deal with a lot, you know, of issues as well, as I stated, which were detailed very well in that film, Rand University.
Excuse it, but it explained it.
Yeah.
And still, he pushed himself to be one of the greatest receivers in the history of football.
Exactly. And that's what life is about. He didn't sit back and say, I don't have a dad. You know, this society owes me something. You know, and if I don't get what I'm owed, I'm going to go out and rob people or sell drugs and destroy my own community and blame everybody else. You know, he set a goal for himself and he accomplished his goal. So once again, God blessed him.
You cannot justify with a clear conscience, as far as I'm concerned, leaving him out, because what you're saying is the numbers, your level of production on the field means nothing, because we believe you negatively impacted grown men who were paid to ward off all of those distractions.
But even if
You could tell Stephen A. You could tell he's a Boule Negro. Boule Negroes always going to the black preacher voice whenever they're trying to make a point.
Even if he did, then they would be charged, those who would keep him out, with showing somehow how he brought down the level of a team and how that exceeded the individual production that he put out. Quick.
Well, because they're not forced to reveal who they are, because they're given that level of anonymity, the NFL Hall of Fame voters are never really held accountable or culpable for their misuse of power when deciding who's going to go into the NFL Hall of Fame. That also is an issue. They should be stripped of their anonymity if they're going to start to create their own parameters.
Quickly.
Which is a false narrative.
I agree with everything you said, except I don't think that you keep, just because they're being idiots about T.O. doesn't mean you keep Randy Moss out. And finally,
Wait a minute, because
I can't prove this with the numbers.
Sure.
I agree with you. I think Randy Moss there was something more transcendent about him.
There was something more
Between the two, I can't prove it with numbers.
There was something more transcendent.
He might not be the better overall player.
He wasn't. He was just more spectacular. Well, that's why I stated Randy Moss made more wild plays than T.O.
T.O. is more physical and everything. Randy Moss
Look,
is just
there
better.
was something
Eyeball
more,
test.
there was something more transcendent, no doubt about it. But you have to remember, Randy Moss was perceived as having his own behavioral issues.
Yeah, taking plays off. Yeah.
So my point is, if that's your reason for leaving T.O. out, not to say that one was worse than the other, or whatever. The point is, you have no justification for doing it to either of them.
We have to go. At the end of the day, it's a performance award, not a character award. There's only been one first ballot Hall of Fame wide receiver in the last 20 years. That would be Jerry Rice.
Of course, we all know that that's Jerry Rice. But let me also say this. The NFL is entertainment. It is a show. And even getting elected or selected for their Hall of Fame is a show. Because they could look down their list and they could tell that certain guys are Hall of Famers. You're not an Hall of Famer in your first year of eligibility, and then all of a sudden you do become NFL Hall of Fame worthy in your 6th year or 5th year of eligibility. You haven't played in that intermediary period, so nothing has changed. It's clear that the NFL wants to have a certain amount of theatricality added to that, that ritual of who gets selected for their Hall of Fame. Remember, Chris Carter, for those of us who saw him play in the 90s, dominant possession receiver, dominant. He was like, for those of you who didn't see him play, he was a lot like a Larry Fitzgerald today. Chris Carter was, from about 1990 all the way to about 2000. Dominant receiver. It took him years to get in. Michael Irvin didn't get in the first try. So Sterling Sharp, one of the all-time greats, still isn't in. And he went down due to injury, but he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. So I'm sure that Randy Moss will get in. Not this year necessarily, but if he does get in this year, that is a true slap in the face to Terrell Owens, and it's confirmation that there is a personal vendetta against him. So we're certainly going to have to keep track of that, because I believe that narrative is just getting started. But anyway, peace.